Nice. So, Kristen, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Doing our sound checks. This is Liquidware Unplugged, so we have audience members already on. They get to hear our sound checks. They get to hear us talk about the weather or anything else we want to talk about. We're waiting on one more panelist to join us, Gabe Knuth, and he'll be with us shortly, I'm sure. If
Jason,
you are,
got a little bit of an echo.
Do I?
Hmm.
That's part of why we try to fix this, right? Let's see what I can adjust. I don't know if that's any better. Is that any better? Just changing the volume.
Better.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
You're good.
Probably coming back from my headset.
I think Gabe is joining us shortly, looks like.
Good. Audience members, you get a live look at us doing our sound checks. That's part of the nature of Unplugged. Good morning, Gabe.
There we go. Good morning, guys.
Got your ears
Hey,
on? Smoky.
Sorry, yeah. Well, I'm fighting a head cold too, so if my webcam goes off, it's because the world doesn't need to see me cough.
Okay, sorry to hear that. I'm glad you're able to join us.
Yeah, no worries. Wouldn't miss it.
So we literally have hundreds, if you've seen my social media post, registered for this, so we're excited. This is Liquidware Unplugged, the attendees that are watching us now, and there's a couple handfuls there. They're seeing us do our sound checks and making small talk as we lead up to the official start time of this is 15 minutes after the hour. Easiest way to say that across time zones. We talked about on our meetup last week some interesting things. Saw James just put something on social media this morning about AI, and it was something from ChatGPT that they had put out. You want to share that with us, James? Because I thought it was an interesting take on ChatGPT. That's not what this webinar is about, but it is so timely. I thought it would be an interesting look 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, when this is on YouTube, what we thought of ChatGPT and some of the AI things we see emerging.
So basically, what it said, it was very brief. It basically said ChatGPT will not replace a person. A person who uses ChatGPT will replace a person. So all about basically, as we know, embracing new technology, which is what we're all about. So yeah, I thought it was an interesting take, and it really kind of, not to be scared of something new. You need to embrace it and adapt to it. Standard stuff for people like ourselves who've been working in IT for years. So we're always adapting to new things. So this is just another one of those things.
The problem, I think, is there's no shortage of incendiary headlines, right? Like, I just saw one that was some college professor gave ChatGPT an MBA exam and it passed, and we need to sound the alarm and stuff. And I, okay, that's fine. That's something we need to be aware of. But the internet was really disruptive when it came to like any education as well. So it's funny how many times this comes up in my circles from non-IT people that are just like reading the news and hearing about this. And it does seem really scary. But I think it's one of those things that we have to learn to work with and embrace.
I'm adjusting my own sound. Give me a moment as you guys.
I hear an echo. And I didn't hear it when James was speaking. James, can you try muting for a second?
Sure.
All right. Now, is there still an echo?
No, it seemed to cure it.
All right. Maybe headphones for James?
I'm trying a couple different things too, in case it was me. So I don't know. Did it come back when I just started speaking?
No.
No, because your mic was on the whole time.
You're better now. Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that was my mic issue earlier also, if I should switch back to my other
Oh, your
one.
other mic.
Yeah, let me try that one again, because the other one actually has... Okay, how does that sound comparatively?
It's good.
Yeah.
No echo.
Yeah. Oh, now I'm echoing.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to my other mic.
Folks, this is a good advertisement of why you should use Teams instead of GoToWebinar.
Thanks for the plug.
Liquidware is actually switching over soon, so this webinar had already been pre-recorded or pre-scheduled. We already use Teams in-house. So those of you that are joining us that are in the audience, don't be dismayed. The webinar actually starts at 11:15 Eastern time. So 15 minutes after the hour, we do sound checks and make small talk up until then. And that's what you're hearing in some of our sound checks. We got an echo that was occurring, trying to chase it down. So James has disappeared. I guess he's going to try to rejoin.
Yep, I think he's just muted. I think he's probably trying to find headphones and then he'll come back.
Well, Scott, you said you were having an argument with ChatGPT last week or week before.
I'd call it more of a discussion.
Never had an argument.
No, it was actually interesting. It's shocking sometimes that you're just talking to a bot, you know, and that there's not a human behind it. It's so its responses just are amazing, and they're in context. So like I have 3 active sessions going, and I've had different conversations in each session. If I ask the same question to each 3, I get a different answer, which shows that it's got using the context of the previous conversation in its to formulate its responses.
Yep. James, I don't know. Just say a few words. I think the echo came back when you came back, but maybe not.
Is the echo gone?
I don't think he was echoing anything. He was echoing back our audio. I think that seems to have been mitigated now.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Okay. Sorry about that.
If it continues to occur, what we'll try to use is our personal mute buttons every now and then to minimize it as we go live. I was using ChatGPT yesterday. I asked it to do something. We had a customer ask us, "Do you have any documentation on how Liquidware solutions are used, you know, in a certain way?" And so I was talking to the rep, and I said, "We do have some things like that. Let me ask ChatGPT," and it actually came back with totally irrelevant information. It could not have been more wrong, and I was a little surprised because I was showing him ChatGPT for the first time, and I literally typed in. My next response was, "Almost all of what you stated above was incorrect," and it started to say, "I apologize that my information was incorrect. How's this?" And it gave me a second response, which was actually more spot on.
I had that. Oh, I guess I do recall the argument that I had with it, because I asked it about Windows 365, and it said it wasn't a Microsoft product, and so that I sent it a link to the page that the Microsoft Windows 365.microsoft.com, and it came back and apologized for that, and then told me that it stopped scanning the internet as of 2021. So anything new beyond that, it doesn't have knowledge of.
You just had the AI fight, like, do you know who I am?
Yeah.
How did you learn that information is what I want to ask it sometimes, because it's regurgitating something I wrote maybe several years ago.
Yeah, I'll try that. I'd be interested if it gives us
reference. Are you plagiarizing?
You know what's interesting there, though, is there have been things that I've asked of it, and I can't remember any examples right now, but its response is like, I don't have access to the internet, so I can't answer like timely questions. But if you posted in a current link and it went and like parsed that enough to know that it was wrong, then it must have some internet access.
I guess so. Very specific, yeah.
Yeah, because I did hear of a case where someone asked it, who's the CEO of Twitter? And it came back with Elon Musk. And if it is blocked from 2021 onwards, how does it know that? So,
Maybe it's like a Simpsons episode where they predicted President Trump in 1989 or whatever. Yeah.
Must be it. So let me make my standard announcement once again, is we're having the attendee count go up and up and up. So Liquidware Unplugged, we get started with sound checks and some small talk beforehand. You may even be surprised, I can't believe he said that. Nothing that edgy, but we talk about anything we'd like to in these few minutes leading up to the webinar, and then we'll get to introductions. We appreciate you joining us today. We literally have hundreds joining us or have registered for this event. So it should be a good time talking about the State of the Union for UC. I've been made the presenter.
Yeah, we're going to make you the presenter. Just in case.
Yeah, Scott, you had said maybe you'd share your screen for a couple of things. Do you want to try that at all? Do you want to test it or not?
Yeah, sure. Let's see here.
I can make him the presenter.
Since we're using a GoToWebinar as we are in our transition to Teams for our webinars.
Let's try to share now here and see how this goes. Show my screen. Let's see which screen shows here.
There we go. Technological advancements.
Oh, there you go. All right.
Looks good. Your email's currently up.
Is it showing both of my screens then? Or was it?
It was, I guess.
Yeah.
It was showing Outlook. It started to say Exchange. Does that date me? Exchange 95. That dates me.
I think I'm the only person that has not changed over to the black background for phone and email. What about you guys?
oh, you
Are
mean
you all
dark
black
mode?
background? Yeah, dark mode.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it's my go-to.
Oh,
Yeah,
seems
yeah,
so
for
dark.
everything.
I'm
Really?
still in light mode.
You are?
Me too.
No.
I'm gonna have to give it a try.
Is it better
I
on
just
your
realized,
eyes?
I don't know.
I'm not sure. I just like it aesthetically. Yeah, I think if I like switch to something, when I get like a new laptop or something and it's already been pre-configured and I log in, it's in normal, and I'm like, oh my God, that's way too bright. Yeah, it's too bright for me. So turn it down. So yeah, very much embrace dark mode on everything.
I think I
Okay.
tried it when it was new, but some of the apps didn't respect that setting, and so they would be bright anyway. And maybe I should try it again. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just a user now. Like I used to be an admin and have access to everything. Maybe I'm just a user, and I care if somebody changes my kitten mouse cursor or my background or whatever. I don't have a kitten mouse cursor, but I could see myself, like being hung up on that kind of thing nowadays. I'm just a user.
All right.
You're just immortal now, Gabe.
It was a hard adjustment. I mean, it's been that way now for a long time, but yeah.
All right, here we are, a quarter after the hour, and that's the advertised time that this Liquidware Unplugged webinar starts. So we're going to get started with some introductions. Thanks for watching the intro there. Kristen, do you have any ground rules for us?
Well, I do. If you have any questions today, thank you for joining us. This webinar is being recorded. If you have questions for us, please place them in the chat or Q&A feature, and you will receive a link to the recording within a few business days. And I would like to introduce our moderator, Jason E. Smith, VP of Product Marketing and Alliances with Liquidware. And Jason, you can kick us off. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kristen. So we started this format in 2020 when we knew that webinar fatigue was going to be a real thing and be a little bit more entertained to be live. All of what you'll see today is live, and the discussion's live. We do encourage those questions to come in. I don't know if we'll get to every one of them today because this webinar had Has really good registrations on it. So if everyone asks a question, we may not be able to get to it, but we would love for you to use the chat window and put that in there. So let me introduce our panelists today. I've already been introduced. I'm actually going to ask each to introduce themselves. So let's start with Scott Manchester from Microsoft. Scott, could you tell us what your job responsibility is over there and a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thanks, Jason. So I'm Scott Manchester. I'm the Director of Product Management for both Windows 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop at Microsoft. I'm a 22-year veteran at Microsoft. In fact, 22 years and 10 days as of today. And spent the last decade at Microsoft working on virtualization products. Really excited to be here with some of my colleagues and have an intimate discussion.
22 years and 10 days, but who's counting, right?
Yeah. We have
what I found interesting about you, Scott, was I uncovered somewhere along the way that you hold several patents, and I had actually asked you about this last week, and I thought this is an interesting thing for the audience to know for an Unplugged. Could you tell us how many patents you hold and maybe what one of the two most interesting ones are?
I have 25 patents. Most of them I did here as an employee at Microsoft. One of my early patents in 2003 is one of my favorites, which is the self-orienting display. And it's one of a number of patents in that time frame, but mine has some very interesting claims on how when you rotate a device like your phone and the screen rotates and orients, that process of how that works in my patent that I did in 2003 includes gyrometers, accelerometers, front-facing cameras, Mercury switches, and many of those technologies outside of maybe Mercury switches never really took off in a phone device, but all the other claims are exactly how phones are doing this today. So that was one of my more interesting patents and has obviously broad use. Most people have something in their pocket that uses that technology today. And then I hold 15 patents on Wi-Fi protected setup. Originally, that started as a Microsoft initiative to make wireless setup easier. We used to call it Flash Config and then Windows Connect Now, and later partnered with a handful of other companies in the Wi-Fi Alliance and ratified that as Wi-Fi protected setup. Those are some of my early projects at Microsoft before I got into the virtualization space.
What we know is WPS, right? If you've heard of WPS,
yes.
That's it.
Yes. Yeah.
Very interesting. And that was the second one I didn't know about fully. Yeah, we're very glad to have you on, and we're looking forward to some of the things that we're going to cover. Gabe Knuth works at ESG now. Gabe, tell people a little bit more about you than I did.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm Gabe Knuth. I'm at Enterprise Strategy Group now. ESG is an analyst with them, which is really kind of what I've spent most of my career doing. I call myself just an EUC lifer now because I've spent my entire career dating back to the 1900s doing something with end user computing before we even called it that. And I think it's interesting that I in 1998, I was telling people that desktop virtualization is like using a really long keyboard, mouse cable, and video cable. And then also in 2020 and 2021, I spent a lot of time telling new people, people that were new to desktop virtualization, this same exact story. So over the course of 20 years, not that much had changed. But really, I've got to watch this whole space evolve. And I spent a long time at BrianMadden.com and TechTarget covering it as sort of an independent blogger, speaker, analyst. Then I went to vendors for a while. I worked for FS Logics that was acquired into Microsoft. I worked with Scott for a while. Then I left and went to VMware, where I was product marketing for Horizon and the intersection of VMware Horizon Cloud and Microsoft Azure. So I still worked with the Azure team a lot. And then I left that job last September to come here to ESG, and I love it because I get to broaden back out again and cover a bunch of the entire enterprise or end user computing space.
Fantastic. We are glad to have you on, and good to have you back in the community as a voice, a third-party voice that we haven't been able to hear for a while, and we'll touch back on that in a moment. James.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jason. My name's James O'Regan. I joined Liquidware in December of last year as a product marketing manager. Prior to that, I was an SE at iGel. I've been working with EUC technologies for about 18 years at this stage. I started on a help desk, and then I've worked for various different consulting firms in Ireland, and I spent a couple of years in the US as well. I'm very involved with the EUC community. I'm the co-leader of the Irish Citrix user group, and I attend, some of the big conferences in Europe, such as E2E and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I'm delighted to be here and have the opportunity to speak with everyone. Scott and Gabe, who I haven't met before. So this is a great experience. So I'm really looking forward to the webinar. So I hope everyone else enjoys it.
James is a guy that a lot of people look up to, right? James is on my team, and I found out from someone at Azure, I said, he's a really tall guy. And I said, he is? I've only seen him online,
Yeah, I'm 6'5", so.
6'5". So there's your unplugged plug.
Yeah, I'm sitting down, so obviously.
Right.
I had that experience at VMware. My entire team I'd never met because it had, just the attrition that happened over the years of COVID. And I finally went to VMware Explore in August, September, whenever that was. And I met my team for the first time. And everybody was way shorter than I thought they were going to be.
Yeah, Simon Townsend from Agile was one of the first people who said, he was like, my God, you're tall.
I am.
It's like, just this is the way I am. But this is just, this is the kind of post-COVID thing where we get to meet people for the first time. Like when I joined Agile, I joined right at the beginning of COVID. So I was in my office for two years before I actually met anyone. So we've just had to reimagine how we work and how we interact with people. So it's
That's
just,
right.
yeah. It's just been very surreal when you actually get to meet people in person. So, yeah.
Well, let's jump right into the EUC outlook and the State of the Union. The State of the Union address in the United States is about this time of year, and that's why we thought about let's give people a look with two very great influencers online and with us, as well as James with many years in the industry, myself, quite a few as well. Gabe, you wrote a story, I believe it was in November. One of the first things you did when you came back onto the third-party agnostic side. You want to tell people a little bit about that? And if they haven't read it, we could even tell them a few keywords to look at. I believe I'm thinking about analyzing the chaos in the desktop virtualization market.
Yeah, and honestly, if you just search for Tech Target Gabe Knuth, it pulls up my author page, and it's one of the top couple of articles there yet. Yeah, I spent my, I was at Tech Target from 2000, or at brianmadden.com, let's say, from 2007 to 2018, I think. And so I used to write independent thought all the time. And then once you go into product marketing, you're not writing independent thought anymore, right? You're writing company thought. And so this was my first article back where I could write whatever I wanted to. So it was really fun. And of course I had to, having taken a break for 4 years or whatever it was, I had to write about all the stuff that's going on with Citrix and VMware and Microsoft. And so it started with Citrix. And for years, and I mean like 10 plus years, there were rumors of Citrix being bought. We used to throw around Cisco or Google or whomever. There were rumors out that Citrix was up for sale. In 2015, Elliott Management took a big stake in the company and made some changes, new CEOs, layoffs. There were more acquisitions that Citrix made, Octablue and Reich over the years. A new focus on security or a new focus every Citrix synergy, right? This year they're a security company, this year a cloud company, this year they're intelligence or whatever. Eventually, though, Citrix actually was sold. This was after Elliott took another investment into the company, and eventually it was sold into a private equity company, Vista, and then renamed the Cloud Software Group. So after 10 plus years of speculation, that finally happened. And so in one way, it's like we've gotten the monkey off our back, right? Like it was, customers who I try to, that's who I try to write to when I'm writing. So, and I kind of always looked at myself as a partner or a customer because I've been in those roles in the past too. There's a little bit of twisting in the wind there when you're looking at these kinds of changes to see what's going to happen. Well, now we know what's going to happen. And we can get into this later if you want, but that deal has finally closed. And so now we get to move forward. We kind of put our stake in the ground now. The acquisition happened, and now we can move forward and actually see what happens with Citrix, NetScaler, ShareFile, XenServer, and then plus whatever Tibco does, and the other things that were part of this whole acquisition. But at about halfway through that whole process, VMware gets the news. Let me back up a little. 2021, fall of 2021, VMware finally spins out from Dell. That was something that had been in the works for a long time, and VMware spun out from Dell. And then like 6 months to the day later, we found out that Broadcom intended to acquire VMware. And so while that's still in process, a few things stick out about that. Broadcom is known for their private equity-like acquisitions of companies, even though they're a public company. They acquired CA and Symantec, and it wasn't pretty when they did that acquisition. That's why it was private equity-like. There's some increased scrutiny from the EU as far as like whether or not this deal is going to move forward or not. And the thing that sticks out to me the most as an EUC person is that while Broadcom has mentioned Tanzu and a bunch of other VMware things, it never really mentioned EUC, so I don't know what the EUC plan is. So I don't know what's going on there yet, because again, it's a little bit further behind than Citrix is, but I think in the next year we're going to start to learn that. So there's all this turmoil, right, among what had previously been described as the number one and number two players, the people in the driver's seat of end user computing. Meanwhile, Citrix and VMware are still duking it out amongst each other as well. While all that's happening, though, there's Microsoft. Microsoft is finally promoting what was the RDS platform that Citrix and VMware environments were built on, right? Like Microsoft was always there behind the scenes, but most customers are running Citrix and VMware on top of that. Now Microsoft has become like the first party solution that all these other companies need to work with, because Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365 are now out, and they're rapidly innovating, and customers are learning that in a lot of situations, you only need AVD or Windows 365 to get the job done. And so what we've got, I'm not saying this because Scott's on here, I wrote this thing 3 months ago. What we've got is Microsoft finally in the driver's seat, both behind the scenes and now like out in front, publicly visible for everybody to see. And there are areas where other partners that aren't Citrix and VMware can also add some services to it or add some capabilities, like Nerdio, Parallels. I'm trying to think, I think Frame might be doing something, WorkSpot. Like there's all these other opportunities now for companies to work with Microsoft to do desktop virtualization that are fundamentally different than the way it has been for the last 20 some years. So the whole kind of ecosystem has been, spun around over the last couple of years. And not to mention all of this is happening while COVID is a thing, and all of a sudden the whole world needs desktop virtualization from the cloud. So there's
I would say it was disruptive in a good type of a way. It really pushed the Microsoft technology forward. So Citrix and VMware had to look for an avenue and path, and they have to be able to run along beside it and add core value to it, in the same way that Nerdio is claiming to, in a similar way anyway.
Because it's still hard, right? It's still not for the faint of heart. We used to have this long-running joke that 2010 was the year of VDI, 2011 was the year of VDI, 2012 was the year of VDI, and once 2020 happened, people were like, "Hey, is it finally the year of VDI?" And we're always like, "Whoa, that's this is pretty serious stuff." But what I'd like to say though is that when the world needed VDI was up to the challenge. Like we were able to deliver that across the board wherever it happened to be needed.
Yeah, at the lockdown, it all came together at that moment. I remember I was at a Citrix user group in Birmingham, and there was talk that companies in the U.S. were going to be mandatory working from home, probably on that following Monday or whatever. So we had a lot of them were already starting to do that, but we had several large healthcare organizations there. Birmingham, Alabama is where it was, and there was a planned agenda for that Citrix user group. So it was somewhere around the first or second week of March. I think it was March 12th or something like that of 2020. And we ended up talking about how these companies were going to scale up by Monday to send their workers from home. You know, how they were going to add so many seats or whatever. And they're like, no doubt about it, it has to be cloud to do this. And there was those weeks where all of a sudden the cloud was taxed and asked to do something that had never been done before. And right place at the right time, Microsoft was coming forward with WVD, as we called it at that point, and technologies that could help do that. And Citrix Cloud was there. So there was no doubt that people were going to burst scale within days to that. And we saw many of our customers do that.
Yeah, that was the week we all learned that reserved instance is a licensing or a pricing model and not like my dedicated hardware in the data center.
Yep.
Right?
So Scott, could you tell us a little bit more about AVD and also Windows 365 and really, I believe it was 2018 at a show in Anaheim that I was approached by one of the program managers that told me to give me a first look at what they were calling RDMI at that time, and how things may go forward. So, you know, a short history of this new burst of innovation from Microsoft in this area.
Yeah, so I had the great opportunity to work with some of the best and brightest here at Microsoft to deliver both Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365. And early in the planning for what became Azure Virtual Desktop, it was clear we were getting signals that there was the need for something more flexible and more optimized for managing and deploying cloud-based workloads. And at the time, we were seeing a really strong growth in the partners, you know, MSPs and HSPs offering virtualization solutions for smaller businesses. And they were doing it using RDS, and then, you know, to do this in a cost-effective way, they were separating tenants using OUs inside of a domain, so that they were literally hosting multiple tenants under a single domain controller, and just using tools and techniques to try to get the cost down to do this in an affordable way. And we realized that we had a great opportunity to provide a better set of tools and resources for those hosters and for other customers by offering the management plane as PaaS services, and then starting to migrate to a model where you didn't have this domain requirement, right? You can do a pure cloud-based deployment with cloud-based identities. And so began the development of a set of PaaS services, and RDMI stood for Remote Desktop Modern Infrastructure. So we were rebuilding the infrastructure, going from server-based roles to cloud-based roles, and using modern identity and modern security technologies. And we announced this at Ignite. It must have been around 2018, maybe even 2017, as RDMI, the set of PaaS services. And then immediately we started getting a lot of signal from customers that though this is a step in the direction that they wanted to go, they were looking for even a more finished offering from Microsoft, something where they didn't have to manage these PaaS roles in their own environment, that it was just a set of PaaS services that were multi-tenant PaaS services that any customer can subscribe to. And then so that feedback we got from customers caused us to evolve what was previously called Remote Desktop Modern Infrastructure into a set of Azure app services that were multi-tenant, and a whole bunch of other improvements that came along with that great dialogue we had with customers. And one of the great things about getting out early and telling your user base about your innovations and the direction you're going is it gives an opportunity for them to help give you feedback and be able to implement that. So we made a quick pivot, and we got back out with Azure Virtual Desktop as a private preview and then a public preview. And then September of 2019, just 6 months before COVID really hammered everybody here in the States and across the world, we announced GA that product. And obviously timing was great because many customers had already started kicking the tires on it. And then when they were forced to embrace virtualization for a larger part of their organization, they probably intended to, they were well along their way in evaluating the technology, and allowed them to move pretty quickly just to kind of ramp up their rollout. And oddly enough, I had got probed by some of the leadership here at Microsoft to investigate opportunities to build even a more finished service. And so in December of 2019, I decided to go off and build this new team to start building on Windows 365. And then, of course, February is when, you know, COVID reached the States, and my entire team, which was about 4 people at that point in time, we all were sent home, and we built the entire team. You know, kind of going back to some of the discussions for those that were connected up earlier, we're talking about, you know, the effects of working remotely, and sometimes you don't get to know your team until, you know, a long time after you had a lot of Teams calls and other engagements. But anyways, we hired this entire team, the engineering team, all the product managers, and everybody during COVID. And frankly, we got together, I think it was in December of that year, for a little ski event where we kept our social distancing and got to meet people for the first time. But that entire product was built during COVID. So Windows 365 went from inception to private preview, to public preview, to GA, all during COVID, and it was a very complementary product to Azure Virtual Desktop, because Azure Virtual Desktop certainly takes this concept of traditional VDI. Gabe talked a lot about that evolution of VDI, and brought that up to the cloud. And so we call that cloud VDI. Many different analysts have different terminology. DAS is a term that's used a lot to describe, you know, a more finished service offering desktops and remote apps out of the cloud. Though there's, like, you know, if you're reading a Gartner report, they have 5 categories of DAS. So we don't really subscribe to that DAS terminology so much. In Microsoft language, we have 3 categories of virtualization: VDI, which is your traditional, typically on-prem based, server-based infrastructure type virtualization model, and then we call cloud VDI, which is lifting and shifting that type of workload to the cloud and cloudifying it. So going from server-based roles to PaaS-based roles, and then giving flexibility for customers, same type of flexibility they would have with on-prem resources now in the cloud. So you can choose from any, you know, VM type in the Azure Gallery, any storage type, and you bundle these things together and create your own workloads that you manage. The infrastructure is modern and PaaS-based, and security is now AAD or hybrid. Conditional access policies, all these things now come to bear that you can do now when you're running cloud VDI. And cloud PC is another concept that is something we would call an evolutionary advancement in virtualization, where cloud VDI is kind of a natural advancement, taking that VDI workload and moving it to the cloud. But with Windows 365, it was our charter was to rethink virtualization. If you built it today with throwing out all the rules and all the things we think we hold as truths around what virtualization should be, and you started over, what would you build? That was kind of the starting point. And that led us to think about, well, what's the right admin persona to manage compute workloads from the cloud? Is it some new type of admin, or is it the traditional admin that manages physical devices? And if that is the case, then how do you make it so that they can use the same tools, processes, images, workflows, everything for your cloud PC that they do for a physical PC? And so hence was born the integration of Cloud PC right into the Intune portal. Right alongside all your other physical device management is where you manage Cloud PCs. And it's like, so I think it was someone from VMware actually that coined this term, click, click, boom, right? That's the concept, right? A couple of clicks and boom, you've got these cloud-based workloads up and running. And that's conceptually the whole principle around it, is that you can take an admin that manages physical devices. They have expertise managing Windows and Macs and Android, iOS, and with a couple of clicks, they can turn a virtual machine out of Azure into a cloud PC, a device category that they can manage exactly the same way they do physical devices. Same security tools, same images if they want, the same apps, same security baselines, everything works exactly the same. So that's half the equation. The other half of the equation is the end user experience. And Gabe and many others will tell you that, you know, usually someone gets hired into a company and virtualization is forced on them. Not many people come into a company and ask for virtualization. Not, you know, a few years ago, that wouldn't be something you'd necessarily seek, because typically it meant some restrictions in terms of what you could do, especially when those workloads are running in the cloud. When they're running in the cloud and you're on a meter, right, you have to be very aggressive about turning things off when they're not being used. So that leads to things like, hey, I stepped away for lunch, I came back, my session was shut down. Or I left on a Friday and I came back on Monday and I'm getting a fresh desktop when I log in. Right, so it's a little disempowering to a user that may be in the midst of composing some complex email and they got 10 different apps open and it's a Friday night and they're in the midst of typing it, and then, you know, they realize that when they come back to work on Monday, all that's gone and they're have to reset back and get into context to what they were doing, and play that out every lunch break, every evening to every morning, every weekend, the loss of productivity across your organization. So one of the things we thought about the user experience is, let's make sure that it works like your laptop has for the last 15 years. When I flip the lid up, it goes back to where I was. You know, it restores back to the original state I was in. Let's make your virtualization experience work that way. Now, how do we give the power back to when the machine gets in a bad state, right? If I have a virtual machine that's in a bad state, as an end user, what do? I pick up the phone and I call help desk, right? If my PC gets into a bad state, what do? I hold my finger down on the power button for 15 seconds, you know? Any novice user knows how to do that, but we take that power away from the user with traditional virtualization. So we gave it back with Windows 365. We gave back the ability to back up and restore your machine. We gave you back the ability to troubleshoot and diagnose it like you would a physical machine. We gave all that power back to the end user. And we gave power to the admin to give more flexibility too, because now we're running as personal desktops. I can give that user admin privileges. I can make them standard user. There's so many things I can control, and I can create this great end user experience that's more consistent with the physical PC. And I can create this great admin experience that allows them to manage virtualization workloads right alongside their physical workloads, and think of them as just a single group of resources that they manage.
The work from home and work from anywhere effort that's come along with COVID and lockdowns, and now just with the way that the world, in my opinion, is going to be doing business for a certain percentage of workers, I think that Cloud PC came along at a great time. I know even here at Liquidware, when we have new people join us, so should we really give them a brand new PC, or do they have something that they can repurpose and we can assign them a Cloud PC? And we've done that for several of them, and we can have them up and running very quickly by doing that. And I have a Cloud PC myself, but it just was, you know, it came along just the right time for what was going on in the world, I believe. I've got a screen that I want to share, and
it was interesting to build it during that time too, right? That was the interesting thing. Certainly it happened at an interesting time, but building it while we were living that experience really helped us fine tune it, right? We're like, okay, we're literally stuck at home. We have no choice. We can't drive to the office and then go write all this code to support people working from home. We were literally building the product while we were, you know, living that experience, and there's no better way to shape it. So sorry, yeah.
I will say, even when I was at Microsoft, Scott, and AVD was in development there, like there was a really good focus on dog fooding, you know, like eating your own dog food using AVD. So yeah, I can see.
You guys joined us. I think the first thing we did is get you guys all working within Microsoft inside of an AVD environment.
Yeah, exactly.
So now we've got a couple of offerings from Microsoft, and I put a screen up. I guess you can see it, right? Just confirm. That this came out of the Tech Target editors behind Gabe's story. Put this in, it's embedded in that story that Gabe wrote, analyzing the chaos. But this came also, a lot of it, Scott and I, we discussed it last week, a lot of this came straight out of Microsoft as well. It gives you at a glance a look at where Windows 365 and AVD fall. And I wanted to take a few moments with Scott, and we're not precluding third-party vendors such as Citrix or VMware or Nerdio, or any of the vendors that can add value to that, like Liquidware to these. But there's a way to run natively, and all your one source is Microsoft these days, and you can also run those alongside Citrix and VMware. So we're not precluding that. And there's many, as we know, many enterprises that are still on Citrix and VMware for very good reasons, for example. And there's some other players out there like AWS has desktops, and Nutanix and others. We don't want to forget those as well. But this is the way, these are the direct offerings now from Microsoft. And putting this up here, just I wanted to hear it straight from Scott. What type of customers, or what type of users, even when it gets down to an individual small business or an individual, which way should they go in here, and how could you provide any guidance in here for an organization looking to take advantage of these latest technologies from Microsoft?
Yeah, you know, interesting enough, you know, just a few months ago, we reorganized internally at Microsoft. So when I left the AVD team to go build Windows 365, kind of split, and we built another team over on the Windows 365 side. And we just recently brought those teams together. So now Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365 is one engineering team, one marketing team, one business planning team. We've unified across all disciplines within Microsoft, outside of the sellers. And what that does is it gives us a better opportunity to focus on what I call the and story, meaning many organizations have very discrete use cases for virtualization. And one of these products might be best suited for one scenario, and another product might be best suited for another scenario. And the way we've kind of approached customer engagements and customer conversations in the past was like, you know, I'm a Windows 365 person, so let me tell you all about Windows 365, or I'm an AVD person, let me tell you all about AVD. Now we're to a model where we can much better approach the conversation with customers about what's best suited for that use case within your organization. As an engineering team, we're going to focus a lot more energy going forward on supporting those customers that do use both, make it easier to deploy and manage and utilize resources shared between both solutions, but also ensuring that we keep clear differentiation between the products, right? That's best suited for Microsoft and our customers when we can focus our energy on filling gaps in between the products, but not by having both products do the same thing. So you see a lot of that already looking at a table like this about the core capabilities of each one. I'll focus on Windows 365 Business first, because that is one where you see it says under 300 users. The reality is you can scale it down to 1. There's no fixed cost whatsoever. This is one of the first virtualization solutions in the market that has no fixed cost and can truly allow us to scale. We've been running, you know, questionnaires with our partners all the way since I joined the team 10 years ago. So we do this annual thing. We go out and send this questionnaire out to people who are hosting virtualization workloads, small and large. And one of the questions we always ask is, what's the smallest deployment you can support? And that number used to be at 25. Like, you very rarely see anybody offering virtualization for under 25 users. I mentioned that domain controller situation, you know, that was one of the fixed costs. And if you want to do that in a high availability way, you've got redundancy, and those fixed costs start to add up, and you can't build really a cost-effective solution with traditional virtualization that can scale down to really small organizations, because you have to amortize those fixed price. And that 25 threshold was really where it ended up being. So when we built Windows 365, we built it pure modern. So it's modern identities. There's no requirement for domain controllers. You don't even have an Azure subscription requirement to purchase and deploy Windows 365 Business. In fact, it is that truly click, click, boom. Just a couple of clicks and you've got cloud PCs provisioned up and running, ready to go in a matter of minutes. And so this opens up the market considerably. If you think that we were kind of stuck at that 25 and bigger size organizations, being able now to bring virtualization down to those smallest organizations, especially now because nobody's immune. I own some martial arts businesses, and when COVID hit, we all got sent home, and it was obviously very challenging to you know, run a martial arts business when people couldn't be together. And many small businesses were affected just like large businesses, and a virtualization technology might be the perfect suitable technology to allow people to collaborate and be productive even in small businesses. So coming out with a product that really serves that market was filling a major gap that we saw in the marketplace. And then Windows 365 Enterprise, fundamentally same technologies, but Windows 365 Enterprise obviously targeted to some of our larger SMC to large enterprise customers. Fully integrates inside of our Intune portal. This is what we talked about, you know, kind of rethinking how administration and management is done of virtualized resources. In this case, we said, let's make it so that an endpoint admin can build, deploy, and manage cloud PCs in the same way they do physical machines. So it, you know, just the fact that it's inside of Intune, I mean, you're typically dealing with organizations who have the need to manage, you know, enough set of endpoint devices that Intune makes sense for them. And being that we are a full modern Windows solution, meaning it's latest releases of Windows, the use cases are really about desktop PC replacement. Like wherever you thought you might have wanted a physical machine, now you can consider an elastic cloud experience, you know, delivered through Windows 365. But for those traditional use cases of virtualization, some of the things like I've got an app that doesn't run on a modern version of Windows and I need to host it on a server or legacy version, right? Then you would turn to a solution like Azure Virtual Desktop that can support all the way down to Server 2012 R2 now and some older versions of Windows builds as well. And if you have a specific need, like, well, for the most part, my organization runs their work environment on a laptop, running those applications locally, but there's a handful of apps that have other dependencies or security requirements that are better suited to run as a virtualized environment. And so I want to host those as remote apps. Well, then Azure Virtual Desktop, again, is another great solution to support those scenarios. And there's other cases where, you know, you might choose a certain a host pool, a non-persistent host pool for a set of call center workers where they don't want any persistence. You can get some pretty high density because they're only running web apps. So I can take the new Windows 10 multi-user or Windows 11 multi-user, and create a desktop or set of collection of remote apps and offer those up in a density that I control. I can choose the size of the VMs, any size I want. I can choose the number of users per core, storage configuration, and that's where technologies like FS Logics, where Gabe and I, came together when we acquired that company, helps provide that capability. And then other technologies like application virtualization through many different providers out there, and other tools to monitor and optimize that configuration become really important. So companies like Liquidware and many others, partners that are extending the value there, becomes very interesting. So we're pretty comfortable with the suite that we have now in terms of capturing the majority of the use cases out there. But as you mentioned earlier, we have this great partnerships with Citrix and VMware now on both sides, with both Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365. So for those customers that do have requirements, where they have a heavy investment in endpoint devices that are, that they bought many years ago and only support Citrix or VMware, for instance, they can continue to use those now and have a modern virtualization solution. Whether there's device redirection capabilities, certain client capabilities that they require, they can get those now layered on top of both of these solutions. So there's a lot of flexibility that's provided there.
It was a great, put it in perspective. It really did. There's some new things coming with Windows 365, and so we've got a hard stop at the top of the hour, but I want to be able to ask you about some of those, Scott. So if you're prepared to share your screen in a second, go ahead and prepare that. Kristen, if you could give him permission to do that.
Yeah, rather than getting into the details of all the features coming, which there's some great content that went out at Ignite, I'm going to give a little bit of framing of how we think about the evolution of the feature set here. So hopefully I can get it just sharing the right screen here. So let me tell me if that's working.
Yes, as we see
Right.
your desktop background.
So this is the beginnings of a slide deck that I'll be presenting at the IGL Disrupt event and also NerdioCon. And the basis of the talk is around how these virtualization technologies evolve and how just in general, how different products and technologies evolve. And interestingly, if you were connected up early when we were just chatting, getting warmed up for this session, we were talking a little about AI and ChatGPT in particular. These are definitions that ChatGPT gave me when I was
what we're seeing is your background, your desktop background only.
Oh, I'm sorry. You should have been seeing screen 2 that shows. Yeah, I'm not a very efficient here. Let's see if we can get this.
There you go.
Yeah, we can see the slide deck now.
Okay. Somehow this thinks that's monitor 1 when that's an external monitor, which is clearly monitor 2. So we think about these different categories of how products evolve over time, right? There's disruptive technologies, things that kind of turn the market on its head. A great example of a disruptive technology would be like a digital camera, right? Like many, the millennials don't know who Fujifilm and Kodak and some of these companies are because they don't exist anymore. They fell prey to that innovator's dilemma, right? They didn't stay in touch with what was happening around them. And this disruptive technology of CCDs and digital cameras really changed that market, considerably. And then there's this evolution, right? These gradual evolution of products and that movement from VDI to cloud VDI is a great example. A PC is a great example, right? The PC was a very disruptive and revolutionary concept when it first came to market, but over the last few decades, it's evolved. It's evolved into new form factors, new capabilities. But then there's these revolutionary advancements, right? Things that just fundamentally change the way we do business and create new markets, right? So when you want to make a revolution, you want to build something that is clearly different, how do you create new markets, right? Well, you change the dynamics. You change the ability to scale from 25 down to 1. You change the ability for requiring an admin with certain capabilities and empowering another type of admin. And you change the end user experience to where this is something that people try to avoid to something this is something that an end user would seek. So when we think about how these various technologies are evolved, we think of them in these categories of how just general technical advancement moves forward. In fact, I think I got another slide here. I could give a little more detail about what this means in the virtualization space. This is one of the slides here. Let me see if I can get this to pop up here. This way. I'll cheat. Wrong slide. There we go.
Yep.
So this,
VDI.
yeah, and again, this is another dialogue I was having with ChatGPT. So we were having an argument if you were connected earlier about this, because it's got some really, really detailed insights about some technologies, and some newer technologies it tends to not have all the insights as of yet. But I think about this, this evolution that's happened, from VDI to cloud PC, or to cloud VDI, and then this revolutionary change that happened as we moved into this cloud PC category. There's going to be a lot of information shared about this in the next few months as these events unfold. So I mentioned the IGL Disrupt and NerdioCon, and then Disrupt in the US happening as well. So we'll be talking a lot about this, as well as many of my colleagues and constituents that also play in this space. So we'll be sharing a lot more insights about this, but this is kind of how we see things. And when we talk about a revolution, you think about this moment in time when the world changed. And for me, June 14th, 2021, when Satya got on stage at Inspire and said these words: with Windows 365, we're creating a new category, the cloud PC. The product was Windows 365, but the category was the thing that was really innovative. And that term cloud PC had been used a lot, but that capital C in the word cloud there was a lot of internal discussion around that. And the reason that's a capital C when you hear Microsoft talk about it, because it's a defined term within Microsoft, something very distinct and unique from other solutions that we have in market and other solutions that other players have in market. So it truly was the point in time where we set off this revolutionary change and have very distinct products with very distinct use case scenarios. There's another slide here that kind of shares a little bit of a slightly different pivot from the one that Gabe had in his report on the use case scenarios for Windows 365 and AVD. We talked about the flexibility of operating system. I use this terminology a little bit when I talk about Windows 365. It's about the zeros: zero trust, zero touch, and zero ramp. So meaning that zero ramp is I can just grab an end user, put them behind it without any oversight, and have them be productive. Zero touch, we obviously understand that I can deploy those resources without actually physically interfacing with somebody. I don't have to hand them any device, that there's no physical transaction required. And zero trust is that there's protection at every layer in the environment. And then
That's
when I look
awesome.
at it,
but just I've always thought that the definition of a DAS desktop, I realize you're not using that term, but like I give you a credit card, you give me a desktop, end of transaction, is like DAS in its essential form. So I'm a huge fan of that.
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it. That transaction approach. And then with Azure Virtual Desktop, I talk about it in terms of the any. I can have any OS, well, asterisk behind the any right there. Any configuration. I can choose what VM family I want. I can choose any of the regions we want. I can even extend it to our air-gapped clouds. I can extend it to on-prem through Azure Stack HCI. I truly can provision it with any operating system, any configuration, anywhere. So it's all about the flexibility. When I really need all that flexibility, and I've got very specific needs, Azure Virtual Desktop is really targeted at supporting that any case. And with Windows 365, it's about this simplicity, this pure SaaS offering that just makes it very simple to deploy and manage, and very simple to understand your cost model. And we've seen a number of customers who have bought Windows 365 using a CapEx model, and others that have used an OpEx model. So they do an amortization schedule of the CapEx expense translated into these, this OpEx expense. So it's really interesting how organizations are looking at the way they traditionally buy PCs and applying those same economics to buying cloud PCs, where many organizations have made this pivot and saying, I'm going to move more to an OpEx model now. Instead of this huge outgoing expense, every 3 years of buying new physical devices, I'm just going to, get my compute delivered from the cloud, and then embrace new technologies like bring your own PC and allow their employees to connect to the service from any device. To really do this in a way that adheres to some of the security and compliance requirements that many organizations have, that often comes with endpoint management, right? So if that device is going to connect to the service, I not only need to ensure that service is secure, but that endpoint that's connecting to the service is secure. There's no keystroke loggers, screen capturing tools, and things like that. So many organizations find that in integrating cloud PC and the endpoint management into a single portal is actually very helpful, because they can manage the endpoint devices connecting to the service and then the actual workloads hosted inside of the service. And of course, a little plug for some future capability that's coming with Windows 365 and later with Azure Virtual Desktop is MAM support. So the Windows 365 app will be one of the first apps that actually have application management support. So you'll be able to set policies at an application level as opposed to full device management and still get that same security that you require. So many of those BYOPC scenarios, I may not want my PC managed completely by my organization. It's my personal device. I don't feel comfortable with them managing the whole device, but I'm okay with them managing that one application that I use to get access to my corporate resource. That's where MAM technologies really become very powerful to really enable that BYOPC in a more flexible way.
Nice. That's really cool, because you can definitely see a lot where people, they don't want corporate interrupting your personal PC, but a single application you're fine with. So yeah, that's a really cool development.
Scott, there was a few features. If you've got time, there was a few features that had been discussed for Windows 365 that were promised to be coming soon. You want to give people a quick update? I think there's 3 or 4 that if you want to run down those.
There's a really great video we did at Ignite. It's a mechanics video. So if you look up Microsoft Mechanics Windows 365, you'll find a few of them. And the latest one was that we released around September at Ignite, and we talked a lot about some of the upcoming features of both Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365. You'll find videos on both. On the Windows 365 front, one of the things we announced is the new Windows 365 app. That we made a big splash on that on day 2. Was featured in the Panelists keynote. And we showed some of the capabilities that that app, and at that time we talked about the MAM capabilities and how simple it is. We talked about that zero ramp. That app is truly the app that embraces that zero ramp. Because the app is available for download from the store. You can provision it using the new WinGet capability inside of Intune. And it's designed to not require any IT management to help get the user up and running. Like, it has a little tutorial that runs, it kind of orients the user to the application. And it's got this very simple tile kind of model of how you can see your resources, connect to them, and be productive. We are also doing some very deep integration of Windows 365 and later Azure Virtual Desktop into the Windows operating system itself. So once that app is installed on the machine, you can now also take advantage of some deep shell integrations, that ability to swipe between your local desktop and your work desktop. So a 4-finger gesture across the screen or a simple mouse control, and I can switch back and forth between my local operating system and my cloud PC. Windows 365 Boot is a technology that will allow organizations to configure their Windows devices to boot directly into Windows 365. So you're skipping the layered operating system model. You literally are replacing the Windows shell with the Windows 365 experience. A typical end user would not even know the difference. They just log in, they get the login screen of Windows, they type in their username and password, and they're in their Windows 365 session. It just looks and feels exactly like they're just in a local Windows session.
And you're only paying for 1 license of Windows in that case?
Well, if you have a Windows E3 license already, which is one of the prerequisites for Windows 365, then yeah, that Windows device that you have gave you the entitlement to Windows 365 also. So yeah, it's just a one Windows license requirement in that case. And then we kind of reiterated some more progress we've made on Windows 365 offline, which is a very cool technology. But we also announced a new Windows 365 plan that's designed for first-line workers or frontline workers. So it's going to be a very cost-effective solution for those use cases where people need partial access to a cloud PC. So like shift workers that like call centers and healthcare workers and such, where they work in physical shifts, they might share a headset, they might share a desk. Well, now they can share their cloud PC in a very similar way. More details will be coming out about that shortly, but we're very close to going with the preview of that. We're in a private preview. We're going to go with the public preview, and then soon that'll be available later this year.
That's great. More and more organizations adopting these hoteling of office space and things like that. We're talking to some government branches right now about that. When they come in, they have a place they can report in, and that those types of technologies will work well for many of those.
Absolutely.
So we're at the a little bit after the top of the hour. Parting thoughts. I think we gave our audience a look at where some of these technologies are headed, where Citrix and VMware and those long-standing organizations and enterprises, they still can take advantage of these technologies. So you have that advantage there, but you've also got Microsoft innovating, where you can go with native technologies in that regard. Trends in the organization, we touched upon several of those, gave you some resources to look for and to go back and look if you haven't read some of those, one of those or 2 of those stories that Gabe's written lately. We gave you some references to those. So for our panelists, parting thoughts as we go around the room. Anyone who want to jump in first?
Well, I'm excited to read some of Gabe's materials, both some of the older ones and new things that he's going to put together with all the great experience he has in this industry. So
Thanks. Yeah, some of the older stuff is gone. It's been purged for SEO purposes, which I don't understand SEO. I don't pretend to. But yeah, there's still a lot of stuff there for sure. My plan is to continue to write about that stuff, and to kind of be reintroduced to some of those groups that I haven't had a conversation with lately. And so look for something coming up, that talks about Nerdio and Spot PC and things like that. But really, the biggest takeaway that I've got is, if we recall, all those orgs that dealt with COVID really well were ones that had already had a pretty good, mature desktop virtualization environment in place. I would say we get swept up a lot in these companies, whether or not they're doing 100% return to the office, or how they're approaching work from home, whether they're embracing it or going against it. I would say if you plan for hybrid the whole way through, then those efforts are going to pay off regardless of where the users are. So that would be my main takeaway is, stay prepared anyway. And that way you can just deal with everything.
James.
Yeah, no, I kind of echo what Gabe said. Very much, hybrid is the way to go forward in terms of. But I think what we're going to see, obviously, we talked about it briefly, is we're still seeing a period of innovation in EUC, and that's going to continue. Scott thought about the revolutionary things that are coming out of Microsoft, but there will be something else. We mentioned ChatGPT. There'll be something else coming up soon. So I think it's an exciting time to be in EUC and see how it all develops. But I think the main point is there are all these different ways of working these days, and work from anywhere is here to stay, and that has to be fully embraced. But as I said, there is the opposite of, some people do want to work in an office, so hybrid is the way to go. But I think it's a really exciting time to be in IT.
I think that brings up a good point too, because some people actually want to go back to the office. Those people that there were two of them in a 1-bedroom apartment, they've been on top of each other for a long time. So some of them actually want to go back. That's where UCC is also becoming more important, kind of merging into end user computing. UCC is Unified Communications and Collaboration, and there's things that Teams, Zoom, WebEx, all these other companies are doing to make it a more inclusive environment, regardless of where you're working, and still try to replicate that team-based collaborative nature outside of the office walls. So keep an eye on that space too.
Yeah.
So there has been disruption in the industry. The economy, there's some things in flux right now. We know that. So we have to admit that. We've seen people looking for their next job, but it comes at a good time. I mean, there's been disruption that has happened in this industry, and we can't ignore that. But we also know that there's many companies that are hiring. We just picked up someone from Citrix this week. Liquidware did, as a technical writer, and Nerdio. They just got funding because of some of this disruption, and they are hiring literally dozens of people right now. The only thing that some of those e-staff people over at Nerdio are doing are interviewing. So we encourage you to think about the state of EUC is strong right now. Yes, there's been disruption, and there'll be some right sizing, and there'll be some people moving around, but there's great opportunity for those organizations taking advantage of this disruption and advantage of these new technologies that are coming straight out from Microsoft. I'd like to thank our panelists today for joining us. This has been a great Liquidware Unplugged. Scott, Gabe, James, thank you so much for joining us. The audience, we thank you. If you have questions that we didn't get to, we'll take a look at those, and we'll try to contact you directly if you'd like. This will be recorded, and we'll have that on YouTube within the next few days. Thank you to the panelists. We look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Cheers.